Welcome to the International Jurisdiction Academy channel. Today's video is about the judgment of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as IMTFE, which differs from the IMT, the Tribunal of Nuremberg, is commonly referred as the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal and also as the Tokyo Trial, the way it was portrayed by the miniseries in Netflix. General MacArthur nominated judges from 9 countries that signed the surrender of Japan at the end of the war, and British India and the Philippines, which were UK and US colonies fighting the war, and totalizing 11 judges and 11 prosecution teams from Australia, the British Indies, Canada, China, France, the Netherlands, New Zealand, the Philippines, Soviet Republic, the United Kingdom, and the United States of America. That decree from General MacArthur was also known as the Tokyo Charter, or the Charter for the International Military Tribunal for the Far East. The Tokyo Charter defined the course of trial proceedings and procedures for fair trial, as long as it also defined the crimes under judgment and the penalties for them. The people who commit to those crimes are not necessarily the same ones who brought them to effect. So the Tokyo Charter conceptualized 3 categories of crimes defined in Article 5. For centuries before World War II, Far East Asia had wars and a political climate of its own. Under Western influence, Japan started its own imperial campaign in the region for territory and influence, culminating conflicts against neighboring coastal and insular states in both the USA and Russia. In 1940, Japan joined the Axis forces by signing the Tripartite Pact. Then Japan invaded the French Indochina. Then Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Then Japan waged unprovoked war against China and the aggressive war against the United Kingdom and its protectorates, the USA, the Soviet Republic, France, and the Netherlands. Before and during World War II, Japan committed large-scale massacres, rapes, and looting against civilian and military personnel, most notably the Sioux-Chin and the Nanjing massacre. As soon as the war ended, Japan's government ordered all the troops to destroy all evidence of atrocities. 28 men were indicted. 18 senior military leaders, 9 political leaders, and 1 scholar, all by the crimes defined under Article 5. The USA decided against prosecuting the emperor, his family, and the Human Experimentation Unit leader. Since the documents had been destroyed by the Japanese forces, the prosecution took 6 months to present all evidence that centrality and strategy aspects of the participation in the atrocities demonstrated they were consistent, widespread, and strikingly similar, indicating coordination. And they proved the defendants were aware of the atrocities, had legitimate power to intervene, and chose to remain inactive towards these situations, meaning they were negligent to their duties. The main complaint and criticism to the tribunal related to being supposedly biased as a victors tribunal, which has been dismissed by the doctrine. The defendants moved a motion for disqualifying Filipino judge Delfin Haranilla from sitting as a member of the tribunal for reasons of personal bias, because in the past he had been captured himself by the Japanese and walked the Bataan Death March. The request was rejected, but Haranilla did excuse himself from presentation of evidence for atrocities in his native country, the Philippines. Judge John P. Higgins resigned his functions and was substituted as a member of the tribunal representing the USA. Defendants in the trial alleged Western powers caused Japan to leave its centurial isolation position and join the imperialist race in order to prevent becoming a prey in that environment. For that reason, Western powers should be held accountable instead of Japan. Japan allegedly entered the war for self-defense purposes. Some of the defendants admitted to a few of the atrocities, denying that they were reprovable and normalizing approaches to them, treating them like they were correct or simply culturally accepted. Some other allegedly they didn't remember the atrocities had been committed under their command, or that they have tried to intervene but didn't succeed in doing that. The defense also alleged that crimes against peace and the concepts of aggression and conspiracy were not criminal offenses under international law before World War II, and that the Allied powers' violation of the international law during the war should be prosecuted as well, and it was not being. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East spent 15 months reaching judgment, resulting more than 1,700-page long sentence. The reading of this judgment and the sentences lasted from December 4 to 12 in 1948. Two defendants had died and one had been considered not fit for trial for psychiatrist reasons. Six defendants were sentenced to death by hanging for being found guilty on all three crime categories under the Tokyo Charter. One of the defendants was sentenced to death by hanging for crimes in the categories B and C, and the remaining defendants was sentenced to life imprisonment. Three of them died in prison, but the other 13 were paroled between 1954 and 1956. Five out of the 11 justices released separate opinions and dissenting votes. Judge Delfin Jaramillo from the Philippines voted to sentence all accused to death, referring to the penalties imposed by the tribunal as being too lenient, not exemplary and deterrent, and not commensurate with the gravity of the offenses committed. Judge William Webb from Australia and the president of the tribunal wrote a separate opinion in which he agreed with the convictions, but mentioned that the Emperor of Imperial Japan was a constitutional monarch and thereby responsible for taking advice to go on war. In his opinion, Justice Webb emphasized against the argument that Japan had been in war for so-called self-defense interests, that no ruler can commit the crime of launching aggressive war and then validly claim to be excused for doing so because his life would otherwise have been in danger. It will remain that the men who advised the commission of a crime, if it be one, are in no worse position than a man who directs the crime to be committed. Judge Henri Bernard from France argued that Japan's declaration of war had a principal author who escaped all prosecution and of whom, in any case of the present defendants, could only be considered as accomplices, resonating Justice Webb's opinion, but going beyond it, because for him, therefore, the tribunal's course of action was flawed due to Hirohito's absence and the lack of sufficient deliberation by the judges, and that a verdict reached by a tribunal after a defective procedure cannot be a valid one. Judge Bert Rolling from the Netherlands called for the acquittal of several defendants, pointing limitations in holding the individuals responsible for an act of state and making admission of responsibility of a crime. He stated, "I think that there not only should there have been neutrals in the court, but there should have been Japanese also," and he argued that they would always have been a minority and therefore that would not have been able to sway the balance of the tribunal. Finally, Justice Radha Binapal from the British India stated he would hold that each and every one of the accused should be found not guilty of each and every one of the charges in indictment, should be acquitted on all of those charges. He argued that the evidence was still overwhelming that the atrocities were perpetrated by the members of the Japanese armed forces against the civilian population of some of the territories occupied by them, and also against the prisoners of war. But he brought up a notion of justice in which he stated, "A victor can dispense to the vanquished everything from mercy to vindictiveness. But the one thing that the victor cannot give to the vanquished is justice. At least, if a tribunal be rooted in politics as opposed to law, no matter what its form and pretenses, the apprehension thus expressed will be real." The International Military Tribunal for the Far East brought war criminals responsible for millions of deaths and intellectual commanders to judgment and to punishment. That experience fundamented several other exception and transition jurisdiction initiatives forthcoming in its existence, such as in Rwanda, Cambodia, and the former Yugoslavia. By the end of 1958, though, all Japanese war criminals were released from prison and politically rehabilitated. Thank you for watching this video. If you wish to contact or support the International Jurisdiction Academy channel, please like, share, leave a comment on this video, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.